Finland will join NATO within days, ending its long-held neutrality after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, just a handful of European nations remain militarily non-aligned. So does neutrality still work? Does it still matter? Or is it an outdated concept in today's world? This is Inside Story. Hi, I'm Cyril Vannier. Neutrality is under threat, according to its advocates. For its opponents, however, it's a luxury that European states can no longer afford. The war in Ukraine has put more focus on countries such as Switzerland, Ireland, and Austria, who remain non-aligned militarily. Now, those countries have sanctioned Russia, but they're not getting involved in the conflict, not sending weapons or personnel to the battlefield. Sweden and Finland are going the other way. Once bastions of neutrality, they have applied to join NATO, with the Finns to become members in the next few days. In a few moments, we'll be discussing with our guests what neutrality means in today's Europe. Kulsum Sharif begins our conversation.
Finland will formally join our alliance in the coming days.
A move that would end Finland's decades-long neutral status. It comes in the face of a perceived security risk after Russia invaded Ukraine last year, prompting historically neutral European countries to review their policy of non-alignment. Finland, which borders Russia, and neighbouring Sweden jointly applied for NATO membership in May. While Helsinki's bid has been ratified, Stockholm is yet to get approval from Turkey and Hungary.
All allies agree that the rapid conclusion of the ratification process for Sweden will be in everyone's interests. I look forward to also welcoming Sweden as a full member of the NATO family as soon as possible.
Only a handful of European nations remain militarily neutral, bound by their constitution or tradition, notably Switzerland, Austria, Ireland and Malta. They've all imposed sanctions on Russia for its war in Ukraine. The former Yugoslavia was one of the founders of the non-aligned movement, and today Serbia remains neutral, so does former Soviet state Moldova. Last month, far-right politicians staged a walkout when Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the Austrian parliament, saying it violated the country's neutral stance. Some liberal politicians criticized their actions.
Of
course, President Zelensky's speech is compatible with our neutrality. He has also spoken in other neutral EU states, in Ireland, in Cyprus, in Malta. But there, no party turned its back on the people of Ukraine. It is shameful that our Freedom Party is behaving in this way. A real shame.
NATO was founded in 1949 by 12 nations and has grown to include 30 member states. Moscow has been long opposed to the alliance's expansion and used what it called Kyiv's NATO ambitions as a pretext for invading Ukraine. Kulsum Sharif, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
We have got a great panel to discuss all of this. Let's welcome our guests. In Helsinki, Jori Arvonen is Finland's former Undersecretary of State for EU Affairs, now the chairman of the European Centre of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats. In Geneva, Jean-Marc Rickli, a specialist on the military policies of neutral and non-aligned European states. You're also head of global and emerging risks at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy. And joining us from Dublin today, Richard Boyd Barrett, member of the Irish Parliament, the Dáil. You're head of the People Before Profit Party. You're also a leading figure of the Irish anti-war movement. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. Jori, I'll start with you. Is it possible to remain neutral in today's Europe, or has that ship sailed?
Well, depends how you define neutrality. You see, after our two wars with the Soviet Union, we had to build a strong own defense, and we had to adopt neutrality to survive. But we believe that by joining the European Union in 1995, we no longer have been politically neutral, and now we're joining the Defense Alliance in order to never be alone again.
Richard, you're a voice of Ireland's anti-war movement, as we said at the top. You're a staunch defender of neutrality. How did you feel when you saw a bastion of neutrality like Finland switch sides and decide to join NATO, a military alliance?
Yeah, it was very disappointing. And I think it's part of the process of the militarization of Europe and the expansion of NATO. And it's certainly been used by our government, as has the terrible conflict in Ukraine, as an opportunity for those who want to move Ireland away from neutrality and towards the project of militarization in Europe and closer to NATO. But that is something that I would say the vast majority of people in Ireland oppose. And Irish neutrality is very deeply embedded in the Irish psyche because it really is linked to the revolutionary movement for independence in this country, which was critically a movement against the British Empire and against the First World War. So but Irish independence, if you like, is deeply intertwined with the idea of not aligning with big military powers.
But you heard Jori, right? And he said something very compelling. He said at some point we needed to make sure we would never be alone again. And on a basic fundamental level, I think that will appeal to a lot of people. We can all understand that.
Well, on the contrary, I think if you're neutral, you're less likely to be a target for hostile military action. But if you involve yourself in NATO or in the European project of militarization, you're then involved in essentially mutual defense pacts, which mean that if somebody else goes to war, you're then involved in it and potentially can become a target. And that is something certainly I oppose. I oppose militarization and war generally. And while I absolutely, and I think the vast majority of people in this country abhor what Vladimir Putin has done in Ukraine, it is a unjustifiable and murderous assault on the people of Ukraine. But equally, we've seen in recent years the United States, the UK involved in equally unjustifiable, murderous wars, particularly in Iraq. And it's certainly our view that we shouldn't involve ourselves with any of these big imperial powers. But I have to say, in truth, there's elements in the Irish government who would like to push us away from neutrality and involve us in NATO and the project of EU militarization.
Okay, and we'll get back to those. Jori, I'm sure you have lots of things to answer, but let me bring Jean-Marc into this conversation. Set us straight, Jean-Marc. Is neutrality even the word we should be using here? Because we just heard Richard, right, who wants to remain non-aligned, who does not want Ireland to militarize. But Richard did not sound neutral to me. He says he abhors what is going on in Ukraine, and it is an unjust war that is happening. Those are not the words of somebody who says, I'm going to remain equidistant from both sides, Ukraine and Russia. You know, I don't have an opinion. That's not what I just heard. I'm not sure neutral is the word really that defines Ireland, Austria, Malta, EU countries like that.
No, actually, the concept of neutrality is a concept that is a specific posture of states to conduct a foreign policy. And basically, the law of neutrality of 1907 of The Hague has some duties, and the duties pertains to abstaining from providing military support to either side. The duty being impartial, meaning they have to treat the belligerent equally, and a duty also of prevention. So the neutral states have to maintain military on their territory to guarantee their sovereignty. And so what we hear here is that the previous speaker's concept of neutrality is very much linked to pacifism, but neutrality has nothing to do with that. You know, neutrality actually, because of the duty of neutrality to maintain the integrity of your territory, if you look at the neutrals during the Cold War, Sweden, Finland, and Switzerland, they had a big military. And what is important to note is that neutrality means abstaining from military support or being entangled in others' war, but it doesn't mean neutrality of value. And be Ireland, be Austria or Switzerland, the governments very early in the crisis completely aligned with the position of the West. Neutrality here has to be understood as a tool of security policy that basically prohibits neutral states from participating in others' war.
Jori, I see you silently acquiescing. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey, given that you were part of the foreign policy establishment in Finland, the journey of Finland from neutrality to the gray area of being an EU member state and now to actually requesting membership of the NATO military alliance?
You know, we have 1,340 kilometer long border with Russia, formerly Soviet Union, and it's always been a pragmatic thinking and pragmatic choice for Finland how to arrange our security. We had a long national debate for 20 years or so about NATO membership, and when Russia attacked Ukraine, the public opinion soon turned for supporting the membership. We believe that NATO membership will strengthen our security and improve stability and security in the whole Baltic Sea region. And when Finland and Sweden will join, the threshold for using military force in the Baltic Sea region will actually rise and not create new instability. And I think many of my colleagues and friends also felt that as the world became more dangerous and divided between authoritarian countries and free democracies like ours, it was also about choosing sides. And it was really a strong signal from Putin when he was saying that the European security system should be changed so that NATO gives guarantees of non-enlargement, so that Russia's bordering nations would lose their own right to choose how they wish to organize their security.
And did public opinion in Finland switch just overnight on the 23rd, 24th of February, 2022, or was it a process?
It happened within a couple of months, I would say, and I feel that, and I think that there was this silence acceptance that perhaps NATO membership would be the best option, and then it broke out, and the political leadership actually, in my opinion, followed what the public was already saying and thinking.
Okay, I'd like to know from all of you if you feel there is pressure on neutral countries to choose sides. Richard, let's go to you. Do you feel Ireland is being pressured as one of the handful of countries that is holding out?
Without a shadow of a doubt, there's major pressure, and that pressure is not just external within the European Union with the various treaties that have advanced the project of European militarization, the development of battle groups, the development of PESCO, all of which certainly I would see as steps towards the development of a European army. And they're certainly the centre-right parties in Ireland, I think, are very keen to involve us in that process. And they were trumpeting to a very large extent the move of Finland to join NATO. And I think we're hoping that both the Ukrainian crisis and the conflict in Ukraine is a lever that they are trying to use to push Ireland towards that project of EU militarization and closer alignment with NATO.
But I'm curious, are you hearing that, Richard? Are you hearing that when you meet either diplomats, European diplomats in Dublin, or when you meet representatives from European parties, which I'm sure happens to you regularly, do they say to you, hey, Ireland, what are you doing? We need you on board?
Yeah, they're subtle about it because they understand it is a very sensitive issue. but certainly since the Ukrainian crisis developed, since the Russian invasion, which I repeat is something, the vast majority of people in Ireland, including myself, absolutely abhor. It's appalling what Putin has done in Ukraine. But to my mind, and I think to the mind of the majority of people, that is not a reason to get involved in a project of militarization. But there is no doubt there's in the government and in Europe, there is pressure being put on Ireland to further involve itself in the project of EU militarization. And indeed, I would say breaches of neutrality and an attempt to align Ireland with particularly the Western Bloc has been a long-standing project of the Irish government, most terribly, in my view, with the decision of the Irish government to allow about 2 million US troops to go through an Irish airport en route to the war in Iraq, which caused huge protests in this country because people felt, rightly in my opinion, that was an enormous breach of Irish neutrality.
Right. There have been exceptions in recent history to Ireland's neutrality. Iraq is one of them. Afghanistan also comes up as one of the examples. Jean-Marc, tell us about Switzerland, because Switzerland is known for, a handful of things: chocolates, watches, and neutrality. It's famous for that. Now, infamous for neutrality, certainly from the perspective of other EU member states. And recently, Switzerland's neutrality got in the way of other European countries helping to arm Ukraine. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, so basically the Swiss concept of neutrality strongly evolved from the Cold War, where basically Switzerland did not part to any political organization. And with the first Gulf War, Switzerland aligned its law of neutrality on UN law. So basically, if the Security Council decides on Chapter 7 measures to enforce military action, now Switzerland will comply with that. What happened with Ukraine is that also over time, Switzerland decided to align on economic sanctions from major partners. So for instance, in Ukraine, the Swiss government was among the first to abide by EU sanctions. But Switzerland has a law also on export of war materials. And in this law, basically, it stated that when Switzerland sells, or a Swiss company sells weapons to a country, if that country wants to transfer then these weapons to another country, it has to ask for the authorization of the Swiss government. In that case, for instance, Germany asked to re-export ammunition for Gepard tank to Ukraine, and the Swiss government said no, because that would be a violation of its internal law. And that partially, if you want, relies on the principle of neutrality. The principle of neutrality, the law of neutrality states that government, the Swiss armed forces, could not provide weapons to a country at war, for instance, to Ukraine, because that would be a violation. But Swiss company could actually provide ammunition, but there is a principle of equality of the treatment of belligerent. And as Switzerland took sanction against Russia, those of the EU, then they had to. This country had to apply the concept of reciprocity. That's why Switzerland cannot export this weapon. But obviously, that angered European neighbors, and there is indeed a lot of pressure on the country to comply with that, and that has led to discussion at the parliament. But so far, these discussions have not led to any change in the policy, because what you have to understand is that neutrality is both a security policy instrument, but it's also part of identity. You know, Switzerland is running polls and on a yearly basis, and this year, 91% of the Swiss population supports neutrality, and it's part of Swiss neutrality. So relinquishing on neutrality would be, in a way, abandoning part of Swiss neutrality, of Swiss identity, sorry.
Jori, what would you say to the Switzerlands, the Irelands, the Austrias of the world or of Europe? What would you say to them as they remain? Well, we've established they're not completely remaining on the sidelines, because in terms of values, they have actually chosen sides, and most of them have sided with Ukraine. but militarily, they're not picking sides. What would you say to those countries?
Well, first and most, it's up to the Irish people and Swiss people to decide how they want to organize their security and whether they want to join an alliance or not. We did not feel any pressure towards us by NATO countries at any point in our history. It was our own choice, and the way I look at Europe's need to bring back its military capabilities is it's all about building back deterrence. And for us, it means stronger deterrence in the Baltic Sea region when we are joining NATO together with Sweden, hopefully soon. But in today's world, I think everything can be used as we see hybrid influencing targeted to all of our countries, and there are so many ways that we can do more together, even if countries like Ireland or Switzerland are not necessarily joining NATO. We all need to work together, contributing to build a more secure world when it comes to economic coercion, polarization, driven by disinformation, disturbances in critical infrastructure, and all that we have seen by Russia and China and some other actors as well.
One big question I want to get to is, does neutrality work? Or rather, let me rephrase that. Who does it work for? Richard, you obviously are a staunch proponent of neutrality. Is this for the sake of Ireland, for the sake of Europe, for the sake of Ukraine and Russia, for the sake of humanity? Who's it for?
Well, as I said, the Irish tradition of neutrality is intimately linked to the Irish Revolution and the struggle to end British rule. I mean, let's remember, Ireland was a colony of the British Empire for hundreds of years. And the Irish state was born in a revolution between 1916 and 1921, which was both a revolution against British rule, but it was also critically a movement of opposition to the First World War, where the entire world was divided into two camps, and there was a horrific war which killed about 14 million people. So Ireland's neutrality is deeply linked to opposition to colonialism and to imperial conflict, geopolitical conflict between big power blocs. So it's not a pacifist neutrality, certainly in the Irish context. It's more about opposing big military powers and actually identifying with oppressed countries. So, for example, there is enormous solidarity and sympathy in Ireland with the people of Palestine. People see an almost automatic link between the Irish history of a struggle against colonialism and the Palestinian struggle against the apartheid state of Israel. And that was similar with the movement of opposition to the apartheid state of South Africa. So to us, neutrality is not pacifism. It is not indifference to political issues on an international scale, but it is a sort of positive opposition to big military powers and an identification with those who are struggling against colonialism and against imperialism.
Jean-Marc, one of the arguments in favor of neutrality is that it can help the neutral countries to potentially be brokers of peace, or at least mediators. Do you see any of the remaining neutral countries in Europe being mediators in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, whether it's Switzerland, Austria, Malta, Ireland, any of them?
Right, you're right. That's a traditional role of neutral states, what we call good offices, and they being a mediator, offering services that will allow belligerents to talk to each other. And it is true that in that conflict, it has been difficult for neutral countries because, for instance, Switzerland is both criticized from the Western side, but also from the Russian side. Nonetheless, there has been talks, and there are still talks going on in Switzerland among, not directly, but that involve the Russian and the Ukrainian to find some solution. And obviously, the neutral state will always provide a platform for negotiation. But it is true that the world has changed, and you have new actors like Turkey in the current case that could also play this role. But nonetheless, in international system, you always need actors that are able to make a bridge between belligerents, and that has been a traditional role of neutral countries. And doesn't mean that in the future it will not be the case, but it is indeed a bit more difficult these days than it used to in the past.
Jori, I saw you. I don't think our viewers saw you, but I saw you shaking your head. Clearly, you do not feel positively, or you do not feel, you're not bullish on the chances that Switzerland or Ireland or any of the neutral countries are going to be able to act as mediators.
There's no room, at least at the moment, for that, and it will not be small countries like Finland or any other small countries that will have the ability to act as mediator in this war. It's a full-scale war, and Russia only needs to back up. I think we are being tested all the time. Our vulnerabilities, be it military or other vulnerabilities, are being tested, and we need to raise the threshold, the price for those who are testing us, and we need to join our ranks, so to say. But having said that, I very much feel that it's up to Ireland and Switzerland and Austria to choose their own ways.
Jori, it sounds like you're aligned with a famous principle of foreign policy, which is if you want peace, prepare for war. Is that a good way to sum it up?
Indeed, I think that is the Russian mentality, that they are testing our soft spots, and if they feel that it's soft, they keep on pressing.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for all your contributions to this fascinating conversation. Jori Arvonen, Jean-Marc Rickli, and Richard Boyd Barrett, thank you again. And thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle, @AJ Inside Story. From me, Cyril Vannier, and the whole team here, bye for now.